I, 25M, have been dating this woman for a few months now, and honestly we get along really well. About a month ago, I met her for dinner one night at a semi-fancy restaurant around 6 p.m. She arrived a little bit late, and was really apologetic saying "Oh gosh sorry, I probably smell so funky right now, I tried my best to wash and scrub but I know it wasn't enough." She was pretty stinky. She works as an animal caretaker at the zoo and had to stay late that night, so I understood. That night was the first night I really noticed her stinking of animals. It was strong at the same table, something between old fish and a ferret cage, yuck, and rather unappetizing, but not the sort of thing you could smell across the room, so I saw no reason it should ruin the dinner. So I tried to reassure her and said "Oh no you don't." She said "Oh don't lie, there's no way I smell okay right now." So I said I guess there's a slight smell, but it just shows you worked hard. I've never been one of those weak-stomached guys who's going to complain about that. I really don't mind, honest, I'm used to animal smells anyway. To my surprise her eyes lit up and she said "Wow, really, you're serious?" That's so reassuring to hear, and starting opening up about how hard it was to make sure she always smelled good. That she'd often have to scrub for half an hour after work to even be somewhat presentable, and sometimes even that wasn't enough, changes of clothes and boots, that she had to sometimes pick which days to schedule dates with me or run errands based around her off days, or which animals she'd be working with that day, to make sure the stink wasn't too bad. I said wow, I had no idea it was that tough. I asked how other keepers dealt with it and she said most were single or dated within the profession and it was rare to find someone like me who genuinely didn't mind. So I reassured her that yeah, she doesn't need to be overly concerned about that with me. I could tell it meant a lot to her. But I think this turned out to be a big mistake. Over the past month, we've seen each other more often, and she's usually smelled okay, but there have been 4 or 5 occasions where she's smelled horrible. 10-20x worse than that night in the restaurant. These have been house dates and not at restaurants, etc. I have to breathe lightly to even try to stomach it, and it really kills my mood and leaves my house reeking. TL, doctor told my girlfriend she didn't have to worry about her smell so much, she took it as a major green flag due to her line of work. Now I either have to really let her down or resign myself to living in olfactory hell. This actually happened about a month ago, but I needed to recover mentally first. I, 24, temporarily moved back home for some more after graduating college. One night I was bored and I went on Tinder. I matched with an older guy, 37, but he was pretty good looking and we actually got along well. Next day we decide to meet up. I felt like I recognized him from somewhere but it's a fairly small town so I didn't think much of it. We meet up at a local bar, and well, one thing led to another and we ended up having sex in the back of his car. I was leaving the next week so I didn't really care what happened. Next day is the only Sunday my mom has had off since I've been there, and she wants us all to go to church. Guess who's doing the sermon that day? He immediately recognized me, and we make awkward eye contact for a second. Then it hits me. He was my youth pastor. I hadn't seen him in almost a decade. I have no idea if he knew who I was right away or not, and I'd rather not know. I left in a hurry after the service. Oh, and I found out later he was married. So there's that. TL, doctor, I was bored and went on Tinder. I matched to an older guy and we hooked up. Found out the next day he was my old youth pastor. So my daughter, 3, is starting to make friends in the new area we've moved to. We've been here about a year, but she's not really been old enough to go out and play on the street yet. They're a great group of kids, and they mostly get on great, minus the usual childhood-based tantrums. The one she sees the most is Sarah, name changed, 5. Sarah lives just a couple of doors down, and they are constantly in and out of each other's houses. My daughter met a lot of kids on the street through Sarah, so it's been a bountiful friendship for her. Today, a bunch of about 6 of them was playing in our garden. They were doing the usual stuff, playing on the trampoline, playing football, chasing each other, etc. Eventually I suggested a game of musical statues, where you dance while the music plays, and freeze when it stops. Everything was going okay, and I started letting the kids pick their favorite songs to play. We got the usual fare of Disney song demands, nothing that unexpected. Until Sarah, she asked for Let's Get Down to Business, which YouTube had clarified for me as Tiesto, the business. To be honest, I hadn't heard the song before, and because I was starting and stopping it, I didn't really pay any attention to the lyrics. Later I walked the girls around the block and took them home. When I got to Sarah's house, her parents asked me in for a coffee and a chat about what they got up to. I filled them in, and told them about musical statues as well. I asked Sarah, how did you know that song? I haven't heard it before. Before anyone else could talk, she said without skipping a beat, Mommy and Daddy play it in their room when they lock their door, it's loud. It took a minute for the penny to drop for me, but Sarah's mom's face going red sped the process along quickly. I hurriedly bundled my daughter out, and when I told my wife about it, she laughed her ass off at my misfortune as I despaired into my hands. TLDR, a game of musical statues with the kids revealed the music that my neighbors like to fuck to. Edit, saw all those kbot comments, had no idea what that was until I clicked one of the links. Holy shit, that is ear cancer. First of all, for the younger users among us or anyone who may not be familiar with Cradle of Filth, they're an extreme metal band who were popular in the 1990s among certain sects of the metal community. Now, let me set the scene. This afternoon I was settling down in my flat here in Swindon, England after a long and exhausting morning spent helping my brother with some painting and decorating at his new house. I decided to put on one of my favorite albums of all time, which happens to be by Cradle of Filth. Not feeling like wearing headphones, I decided to instead connect my phone to my Bluetooth speaker. With Bluetooth successfully connected, I went to Spotify and put on the album. The opening track, a particularly brutal composition of dark, growling, scary, good old-fashioned extreme metal, began to play. Strange, I thought. I noticed the sound seemed to be particularly quiet and muffled in spite of my speaker being turned all the way up. So I ramped the volume on my phone all the way up to maximum, and finally the music was of reasonable volume. Still pretty muffled though, so I began to suspect my speaker was starting to wear out and in need of replacement. I laid back on my sofa and cracked open a drink. I was knackered from my busy morning and in dire need of some rest. About 2 minutes or so into the song, it suddenly cut out and I heard a loud wailing coming from my next door neighbor's flat, followed by Mommy, Daddy, and some panicked cries. Worried, I put my ear to the wall to try to hear what was going on, and although I couldn't make out every word, I heard the little girl telling her parents that some scary noises suddenly started coming out of her speaker and that she couldn't turn it off. My heart immediately sank as I realized what had happened. Turns out when connecting my phone to Bluetooth I hadn't selected my speaker at all, but somehow accidentally connected to the speaker belonging to my neighbor's sweet, innocent 7-year-old daughter. The crying and wailing continued for a good 20 minutes afterwards, as her parents desperately tried to console her. Eventually, by the sounds of it, they were successful in doing so. Am I going to go next door to explain and apologize? Maybe someday. But that day certainly isn't today. Today will be dedicated to digging myself a hole in which to hide in shame for the next 10 years. If anyone's curious as to what the offending song was, here it is, https://2.b/9ancuxptlu https://2.b/9ancuxptlu. Now just imagine this song suddenly and completely unexpectedly blasting out in a 7-year-old girl's bedroom at an almost deafening volume. Oh man, I'm never living this one down. TL, doctor, I accidentally connected to my neighbor's Bluetooth speaker instead of my own, and scared the life out of their 7-year-old daughter with an extreme metal song. Tifu parking my girlfriend's car. I'm not quite sure if this is the best place to post it, but I'm feeling guilty enough that it seemed fitting. My girlfriend, 25, lives about an hour away in a small town. She was going out of state for the weekend for her friend's bachelorette party and had to use the airport that's only a few minutes away from my apartment. We figured she would just pick me up from my apartment and I would just drive her car back. All was going perfect. I had made her some coffee since she had to drive an hour to be at my place by 5:30 a.m. I dropped her off, then drove back to my apartment complex. Well, about a week ago they had sent out a notice about guest parking and that fines would be handed out to anyone parked in the complex who wasn't a tenant. They specifically said the road in front of the complex was the only area for guests to park. So of course that's exactly what I did. I went out of my way to make sure her car was parked on the right side of the road even. She was having such a great time over the weekend, and we really opened up a lot to each other emotionally and talked about how excited we were to see each other at the airport. On her last full day of the trip, I had gone to run an errand, and driving back I saw she had a green paper tucked under her windshield wiper. Initially I was annoyed thinking it was a warning to move the car because they specifically said it was guest parking. I went to check it out and someone had hit her car. The paper was an incident report. Without even thinking about it, I sent her a picture of the damage in the papers on who to call, and I feel like I really just ruined her weekend. She's already so stressed about money and now she's worried her rate will go up and I feel absolutely terrible. What's even worse is the incident happened the day she left and I didn't leave my apartment until 2 days later. I don't even understand how it happened because it's a wide street, wide enough for at least 4 cars I'd say. They hit the front of her car, so they had to have been literally all over the road, but her car was the only one parked there and it feels like had I just moved it forward a few feet this would have never happened. She's been acting a little distant since I told her about it and I really feel like I ruined the good time she was having. I go to pick her up in a few hours and the anxiety is eating away at me. I was really looking forward to rushing out to hug and kiss her when I saw her, but now I'm afraid she won't want to even talk on the drive back to her car. Honestly, any advice on how to make it up for her would be helpful. I already told her I could pay for repairs, but with her rates going up, I don't know how much it will help. Update: I picked her up from the airport and I could tell she was exhausted. The ride over to my apartment was a little quiet, but I really think she's just tired. She had to wake up at 3 a.m. to get to her flight today. But we looked at her car and she looked at the debris and laughed, saying that it seems like the other car got more damage. We loaded up her car with her bags and next thing I knew 2 hours had passed with us just standing by her car while she told me about a terrible book she read on the flight, how regretful she is that she let her friend paint her nails blue. She's the more butchesque one out of the two of us. It's definitely a look.